Hey, this is Politics by Jake, and before we go any further, let me say something plainly because a lot of you are new and a lot of you are listening because something doesn't feel right. You're not imagining it. What you're reacting to is not one headline, not one speech, not one outrageous comment. You're reacting to pattern recognition. And human beings are very good at pattern recognition, especially when systems start behaving abnormally. And what we're living through right now, I think everyone can pretty much agree, is not politics as usual. It is power under stress. And stress systems believe in predictable ways. They lose the ability to prioritize, they react instead of decide, they substitute noise for resolution, and this matters because when people ask the wrong question, they get the wrong answer. And the wrong question is this the end of the world? And some people are coming very close to asking that, my colleagues. The right question is, what breaks first when power is under pressure? Because systems do not collapse all at once, they fracture. And fractures appear before collapse. Now, let me slow this down. Healthy governments triage. They rank threats, they decide what matters now, what matters later, and what can wait. Unhealthy governments, they don't do that. They stack crises, they multiply emergencies. They treat every issue as existential, not because it is, but because they can no longer choose. And that's where we are. I mean, Iran, immigration, healthcare, domestic repression, general strikes, foreign threats, election legitimacy, alliance instability. None of these are being resolved in ways that reduce pressure. They're just accumulating. And that's not accidental incompetence. That's structural signal. Someone is trying to make you afraid. Someone is trying to make you anxious. Someone is trying to make you insecure. Someone is trying to assert power in this way. When power loses the ability to prioritize, it externalizes. It looks outwards. It seeks symbolic dominance. It tests boundaries. Not because that solves anything, because it doesn't, as I just basically said, but because it feels like control. And a diseased mind, a wounded leader, needs it to be that way, needs to keep you under control, needs to keep everything under control. For the chaos within is exemplified by the chaos without. Do you understand? Does it feel like we're being ruled by chaos? Do things feel chaotic? And it doesn't solve anything, like I said, but it's a key. It's a pattern recognition. To some governments, to some entities or people who hold power, this feels like control. Okay? So keep that sentence in your head, why don't you? We'll be coming back to it. Now, empires don't fall because enemies attack them. They fall because they misallocate attention. Rome didn't fall because of barbarians. Rome fell because it couldn't decide whether its real enemy was inflation, corruption, military overreach, or internal decay. Late-stage Britain didn't lose its empire because rebels were too strong. It lost because it could no longer afford coherence. The Soviet Union didn't collapse because the U.S. invaded, because, of course, the U.S. didn't invade. It collapsed because its internal narrative no longer matched its lived reality. And this is important to note with the present illegitimate administration. Its internal narrative doesn't match its lived reality. And people can see it. Like I said, humans are good at pattern recognition. They can see And when that happens, whether it's through mental illness or some other condition, purposed or incidental, leaders compensate. They don't fix the internal problem. They perform, because the internal problem is what may have catapulted them into power in the first place. No, they don't do that. They perform authority elsewhere. That is the lens that I want to talk about in this particular situation. Because if you don't understand that lens, Greenland looks bizarre. If you do understand it, Greenland looks inevitable. Now let's talk about Greenland, okay? And I want to be very clear, right up front. This is not about Greenland. Greenland is the object, obviously. The behavior is the story. And here's the claim, stripped of rhetoric. Trump says the United States must own Greenland in order to defend it. That statement alone tells you everything you need to know about how he thinks, because that logic does not come from statecraft. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday on yesterday's show. It comes from something else. It comes from where he lives. It comes from where he started. It comes from where he sat at the feet of his cruel father, according to Mary, his niece, who lived in the household and probably would be aware of that, who abused, and this is where the wounded leader comes from, who abused Donald as a young man and who, she says, was cruel to him. It comes from real estate, because that's what the Trumps did. It comes from ownership. It comes from title. It comes from control, because that's what he knows. This makes sense if you're a Queen's landlord. It does not make sense if you're running a global alliance system. The United States already defends Greenland. It did so in World War II. It does so through NATO. It does so through treaties. I mean, this is why you hear me say, and I, for those of you who missed yesterday's show, I'm going to talk a little bit about this again. This is the idea. Trump, you've heard me say he's not fit. And others of my colleagues say he's not fit. And I'm going to explain this to you. He's not fit to govern. And here's why. His logic is lacking. He says, I have to own Greenland in order to defend it. Well, we already have treaties with Greenland. He didn't know this, I don't think. And the people who are behind him, who are the tacticians, who are the technicians, who are the ideologues, either didn't tell him or wouldn't tell him, because they have their own agenda. And they look at Trump as a useful idiot. Just like Lenin, just like Stalin used to talk about the useful idiots. And they knew that the masses can always be persuaded to act against their own best interests. Why does he know this? Because he's the president right now. And he's persuaded about 50% of the country to act against their own best interests. How is it that you think, I ask you, that a billionaire has the same interests as the masses? How is it that you think that? Well, you got 50% of the people to think that. And we've talked about the whole Jungian thing, and we will talk about it some more. The wounded leader, the wounded followers, the collective psychosis. But this is how he did it. And at this point, I'll tell you what, let's take a break and end this segment, and we'll pick up here, okay? In the next segment, let's have a couple of commercials. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, thank you. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back, and we've been talking about Greenland, but I've been talking about the aspect that Trump is not fit, and this could sound like shrillness. This could sound like the worst kind of partisanship, to say he's not fit. Why? Because he's mentally ill, because he's emotionally disturbed, because he's paranoid. Because mommy didn't love him as a child, because daddy was cruel to him. I could say these things. And, actually, I have said these things. Not merely now, but I have said them in the past, and others have. I've talked about how his niece, Mary, who, basically grew up with him and saw him and saw the interactions with him, and who is a board-certified clinical psychologist who saw all of this stuff. I've talked to you about the thousands, literally thousands, of mental health workers who have also stated that he's not fit. He's not fit for the office of a dog catcher. And he's certainly not fit for the presidency. Okay. So all of this stuff actually is true. And honestly, all of this stuff in and of itself alone would be sufficient to make a cogent, coherent argument about why this man should never have been allowed to take office. But I'm going to explain to you another thing. And it's quite logical. It's quite reasonable. It has nothing to do with his mental condition. It has nothing to do with the fact that he's got dementia, quite evidently. 3, 4 cognitive tests in a year? You don't do that with someone who is mentally stable and mentally fit. You don't do that. 1 in a year is the most that you do. And he is reclining. He's almost 80 years old. And dementia is a disease that doesn't get better. So in other words, when he's 80 or 81, the dementia is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And this, has to do with his mental condition too. And it's legitimate. It's entirely legitimate to use this as a reason to say that either he wasn't fit, or he isn't fit, or he won't be fit. It's entirely legitimate. But all of these things existing and all of these things being true, his logic, the way he approaches it proceeds forth. Trump is a businessman, first and foremost. Actually, he's a nickel nursing, penny pinching, money grubbing Queens landlord. And that's what his dad Fred was. And that's what his dad Fred taught him to be. So let's leave having stated all of those things pejoratively, and let's just say he's a businessman, okay? And his logic proceeds forth from a business model. That's what he was taught. It does not proceed, and has never, ever proceeded forth from a government model. It does not proceed forth from an alliance model. That's just not him. That's like trying to say a cat is a dog or a rat is a human being. It's not the same thing. It doesn't work. And not only, I mean, I'm returning to this, I admit. Not only that is that he's neurotic, paranoid, he's beginning to exhibit signs of megalomania. This guy is in bad shape. So he's proceeding from a deranged mental condition. His thinking is not logical from a governmental standpoint. And this alone would be sufficient to impeach him. It would be sufficient to point the finger because his thinking does not cohere with statecraft that the United States created for the Pax Americana. And Pax Americana is Latin for the American peace. I mean, like I said, what's the point? Why do you want to antagonize allies? Why do you want to destroy NATO? You've heard me say before, and this is just more proof of it, Trump is a man of chaos. He has a chaotic inner state, and it manifests itself in a chaotic outer state. It creates anxiety and fear. That's how he rules. That's how he governs. But for the rest of us, why do you want to antagonize allies? I mean, Denmark is one of the longest American allies. It was part with the United States of, and I wish I had the name of it, but it was something called, it was kind of funny. It was kind of like that movie, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It was kind of a name like that. It was like the League of Armed Neutrals. It was something like that. And they banded together. Even the Netherlands was part of it, I think, because Great Britain controlled the seas at that time, and neutral nations were being boarded by British ships. And they formed together in a league to stop this, to saying, look, if you're going to board us, we have warships too. And if you're going to board us, we're going to board you. So anyway, that's where it comes from. And I don't want to get into a whole thing with the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or the League of Extraordinary Unarmed Neutrals, but that's where it comes from. 225 years ago, because that's what's happening 225 years ago. And that's about the longest of any nation. And now I ask you, did businessmen build the peace? This Pax Americana, which has been glorious as far as stability is concerned, certainly in Europe. The peace in Europe, because Europe was always at war one with another. That's really what the Pax Americana has done. It's stopped that. And there is now a European Union. Some of you living today may not entirely be up on that and know what the past is, but that's what the past was. So did businessmen, I ask again, build the Pax Americana? No. It was alliances. It was statecraft. It was treaties. And now Trump is mouthing off and saying he wants it all paid back. It's so unfair. This is the wounded leader. And he is wounded. I grant that he was abused, that he was treated cruelly, that he's so out of touch, that he esteems his father when his father was nothing but cruel to him. Guy needs therapy, man. He needs therapy. Big time therapy, because he is out of touch. And I grant that. We don't have to proceed pejoratively necessarily, like that we hate the man. We can have compassion upon the man. We can have sympathy for the man. Some of us can have empathy for the man. But the fact of the matter is that he has ascended, and he has ascended illegitimately, should never have been allowed to take power. Never. Not even the first time should he have been allowed to take power. To say nothing of the second time. But this is where this comes from. It's so unfair. I've been treated so unfairly. And those who are listening to him, it's like they're repeating the words. It's so unfair. We have been treated because they have. Because not these people Not everybody, they're representative of the fact that not everybody's life works out the way they wanted it to. And that's what he's keying on. And that's what they're responding to. And that's what Carl Jung said about the collective psychosis, with the operant aspects being the wounded leader and the wounded follower. This is what it is. So it's so unfair. We've been giving Canada free. He just said this a few days ago at Davos. He said, we've been giving Canada. He said this in his talk before the leaders. He said, we've been giving Canada freebies for years. And he said to the leader of Canada, he said this to him, remember that the next time you open your mouth. That's not how you treat allies. Do you see? He's unfit. He doesn't have the proper orientation. He's nearly 80 years old. He's not going to change. This is what he is, WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. So, all right, this is Politics by Jake, and welcome to 2026. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the fight. So, we've been talking about Trump, and Trump does not think, as I said in the last segment, in alliance terms. He thinks in transactional terms. And when you apply business logic to geopolitics, you don't get strength. You get instability. Why? Because allies are not tenants. They are partners. And when you suggest that partnership is conditional upon ownership or upon payment, or speak pejoratively to your partners and say, you've been getting too many freebies, you need to pay up. Trust collapses in that kind of a scenario. It collapses instantly, which is why Europe reacted the way it did, not with laughter, not with dismissal, but with alarm. Because they weren't hearing a joke. They were hearing a signal. And this is not new. Argentina didn't invade the Falklands because it needed the land. It did it because, remember, Argentina invaded the Falklands in the 80s, the early 80s, and England had to go down and gather its well, it's worship, it's aging empire, what there was of it, and had to go down and stop it. Argentina, as I said, didn't invade the Falklands because it needed the land. It needed because the Argentinian regime was collapsing internally. Napoleon, and of course, this is going back a while, didn't impose the continental system because it worked. He imposed it because he needed to assert control over a system he could no longer stabilize. Putin doesn't obsess over buffer states because Ukraine threatens Russia militarily. He obsesses because legitimacy inside Russia is just immensely brittle. The Russians, who Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and I've said this before, attributed slavery to them. He said the Russian people are slaves, and then he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm also I'm I'm casting doubt because doubt has been cast from my sources upon attribution. But let us just say it is said that Jean-Jacques Rousseau said the Russians are slaves. People always get the government that they deserve. And this is regardless of whether it comes from Jean-Jacques Rousseau or whether it comes from, Harry down at Joe's Bar and Grill. This is an ominous statement that has portent for what's going on in the United States right now. But Putin has the same problem. The Eastern Europeans are assiduously, vociferously on the side of, number one, NATO, and number two, the European Union. Why is that? Russia has, I think it's either 2.5, and you will excuse me, but you can look it up. We have the internet. But you will find that it is either 2.5 or 3.5. I think 3.5 is actually the correct number. $3.5 trillion economy. And you may be sitting, if you're untutored in economic matters, you may say, wow, 3.5 trillion. Holy smokes. Those guys are really doing good. Putin is really doing good for Russia. But for a country the size of Russia, which a lot of people have said is an army with a country with nuclear weapons and a gas station, and that's all it is. That's chicken feed. That's nothing. That's a sign of weakness. That's a sign of brittleness. The European Union, about 26 or 27 trillion per annum. That means per year. This is why the Eastern Europeans are just dead set, and all of Europe, against this, because the Eastern Europe, it was part of the Soviet bloc, and they know what Russia, which called itself the Soviet Union at that time, they know what it's selling, and they don't want it. And the Russians, they don't want it either. And Putin is a revanchist. Putin wants to reinstitute the Soviet Union and get those buffer states back. That's what Ukraine is all about. And he can't do it. But this is what he's doing. And this is more of the same example. I could go on to this. We'll do this in other shows. We'll talk more about this in other shows. We'll talk more about Ukraine. I give Ukraine too much short shrift, and I shouldn't do that. I recently talked about it. We'll talk about it again. But the point, this is the point. This is what rulers do when internal authority weakens. They look outward because the Russians are looking outward, and they see. And they've been invited to even join NATO and to join long since. This just didn't happen a couple of weeks ago. Long since they've been invited to join the NATO. Long since they've been tendered joinder in the European Union. They don't want to do it. Putin doesn't want to do it because he's a revanchist. He wants the old Soviet Union back, but actually he's Duginistic, he's Eurasianistic. He believes that Russia should be, I said I wasn't going to go on about this, but I am, because it's important for you to understand. This is really scary. He believes that Russia should be a continental empire. That's Alexander Dugin, that's Duginism, that's Eurasianism. From sea to shining sea. That's from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And nothing else will do. And that, my listeners and viewers, for those who are viewing this, that is what he believes. So that's not going to happen. And he really believes it. I mean, this is the hill that he dies on. So This is what rulers do when internal authority weakens. They look outward. They escalate rhetorically. They test boundaries. They seek symbolic victories. Not because these victories solve problems, because they don't, but because they postpone recognition. And you can say, well, Jake, you just said that the Russians are. He said, yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. But he's trying to keep them down because he's a strong man. It's what Trump wants to be. He loves to be strong man. It's what he wants to be. And he's trying to postpone recognition. You could say, oh, well, everybody can see. Well, he's doing it anyway. He's doing it anyway. And recognition is what failing systems fear the most. See, the danger here is not conquest, although, obviously conquest, murder, death, destruction of property, change of state boundaries, of course. The danger is unpredictability. Alliances survive weakness. They do not survive uncertainty. If allies don't know whether commitments are real, they have to plan accordingly. They hedge. They, I'm making up a word here. They de-risk. They make quiet adjustments. And once that process starts, it does not reverse easily. This is why rhetoric matters. Not because words cause war, but because words reveal content. And intent shapes preparation. That's what people may miss in the anxiety and the daily chaos of Trump and his illegitimate regime. But this is the message. And this is what's going on in Europe right now. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Look around you. The systems are failing. The currency, the courts, the Constitution. And no one is coming to save you. You feel it. You see it. But you've been told to ignore it. This isn't paranoia. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's collapse. Designed, accelerated, and now unavoidable. So what's your plan? What happens when the banks close? When the grid goes down? When they come knocking and you have nothing protected, nothing structured, nothing left? You don't need a bunker. You need a protocol. The collapse protocol is the plan for people who still think clearly, who want to live, thrive, and protect what's theirs, even in a world gone mad. You don't have time. You don't have backup. But now you have this. Collapse Protocol from Twain Consulting before the end begins. Contact us as soon as you can. Facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call us at 213-465-0639. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back and we're talking about Greenland, but we're talking about it in a way that I want you to understand just exactly what's going on. And I said, because I had a lot of people coming to me in the middle of the week and listening to some of the things that I was saying, and obviously concerned. I mean, no one would fail to see the consternation, the concern that is inherent and endemic in all this. Nobody would do that. I get it. And so that's why we're talking about this right now. I told you I would talk about it on Sunday's show. This is Sunday. We're talking about it. So let's talk about this. Ask yourself this, okay? Why is this treated in the media as, quirky Trump behavior? That guy, that silly, crazy guy. Why the laughter? Why the minimization? Well, it's because naming behavior is uncomfortable. Calling something irrational feels partisan. Calling it dangerous feels alarmist. So instead, it gets normalized. This is why you have heard me say the regular, ordinary, usual that we've all grown up with CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, for those of you who just started paying attention in the 1980s. They've just failed. And they're being taken over. They're being compromised. They're being co opted. Take it to the bank. Believe it. It's happening. I said to you long ago that if the United States was going to be saved, if we were going to recover from this, the institutions would have to save us. And the media is one of those institutions, and it is failing. It is allowing itself to be co opted and compromised for the sake of money. And we could talk more about that, but let's just say that for now and let's leave that there for the moment. And they're not going to. It's all being taken over by Trump. It's all being taken over by Kevin Roberts. Project 2025, that's another thing we've done shows on. We should do more shows on because ever since Trump, of course, denies it. He denies it to this day. He doesn't know. I don't know. Project 20. I don't know. I don't know. Kevin Roberts. I think I met him once, but I don't know. Every week, almost every week, one of the planks of Project 2025 is being implemented by the inner cadre, the technicians, the ideologues, the tacticians, for whom Trump is merely a puppet, merely a figurehead for what it is that they want to do. And, there's another show for you. So all of this stuff is going to get normalized for whatever reason, because the systems are in place, the institutions have been co-opted and compromised, and they're not going to call it out for irrationality, and they're not going to name the behavior, and they're not going to talk about the 200 cities that have joined with Minneapolis for a general strike. They're not going to do that. It's going to get normalized. It's going to become propaganda. And normalization is how systems drift into failure without resistance because, once something is normal, it's no longer interrogated. That's how recognition is delayed. So let's put it together, shall we? Greenland is not about land. It's not about defense. It's not about strategy. It's about externalization. It's about a system under pressure, seeking reassurance through dominance signaling. And it's a pattern that will not stop with Greenland. Because once power starts looking for validation, it keeps looking. And at this point, let's take another break and we'll finish up. And this is Politics by Jake when we come back. All right, and this is Politics by Jake. Welcome back. Welcome to 2026. It's January. It's the beginning of a new year, a year full of import, a year that is going to probably, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, especially from the beginning, the way it's starting out, is going to be very eventful. So I say, welcome to 2026. Welcome to Politics by Jake. Welcome to the show. And welcome to the fight. And I hope you will fight with me. All right. So now we arrive at the part that makes people uncomfortable. As if all of the stuff that I've talked to you about so far had not made you feel uncomfortable yet. Now we're arriving at the part that makes people feel uncomfortable. Okay. A little gallows humor there. Because once you see the pattern, once you understand that this is not randomness. It is not eccentricity. This is not Trump being Trump. You have to confront responsibility. And responsibility does not sit only with the man at the microphone. I told you. It sits with everyone who enables the behavior, the ideologues, the tacticians, the technicians, and yes, the flunkies, the pawns, the useful idiots, everyone who enables the behavior, who excuses it, who launders it, who profits from it, or who just pretends like some of the people in the deep red counties that I listen to sometimes on the radio that say, oh, yeah, I think Trump destroying NATO is good. It's good. Should have happened years ago. He's doing good. I think, oh, prices? Oh, yeah, they're high. They're, wow, they're really, but I think we need to give him more time. Yeah, let's give him more time. You know, what can I say? And this is what they say. I listen to it. This is Politics by Jake. This is my job to listen to this stuff. I am listening to it. They are saying it in some areas of the country, and I am reporting it to you. It's true. They are saying it. So the responsibility sits with them who enable the behavior, who excuse it, who launder it from the media institutions who are now profiting by it. And all those who pretend it doesn't matter, because here's the truth. This is the truth, okay? This trajectory only works if it is tolerated. Power does not escalate in a vacuum, it escalates because it is permitted to, because somebody wants it to. Witness again, Project 2025. Trump, I don't know who Kevin Roberts is. I never met. Every week, well, almost every week, one of the planks of Project 2025. And they won't even, it's, you have to like pay $150 to get it to read it and see what it says. It escalates because somebody wants it to. And it's not Trump. Trump is the doofus. I said that. He's Mikey. He'll do anything. That's why he's there, because he's useful. It's pathetic, really. Anyway, let's strip the excuses away, shall we? When a president threatens allies rhetorically, tests territorial claims casually, floats the idea of owning sovereign land, and treats alliances as revocable leases, that's not strategy. That's delegitimization. And delegitimization has consequences, whether or not anybody intends them. And, look, it's intended here. This is not incidental. This is not an accident. You don't need to invade a country to destabilize an alliance. You only need to make the allies unsure of whether the promises that originally brought them together still bind. That's it. No tanks, no missiles, just uncertainty. And uncertainty spreads faster than fear. Now, ask yourself this, Coral. Ask yourself this, okay? Who benefits when this is framed as noise? The old Romans, who were great. I had 6 years of schoolboy and college Latin. And one of the things I learned is that the Romans were really good at reducing key truths to almost like proverbs. And one of the proverbs And I'll say it in the Latin first, and then I'll give it to you. You got to give this to me. Those of you who listen to Politics by Jake, you've got to say, "Oh, Jake went through 6 years of Latin. He suffered. We have to let him have this." But I'll tell you what it means. Cui bono, cui potest. It means who profits. Well, cui bono means literally to whose good. Who benefits from this? Cui bono, cui potest. And ask yourself this, okay? Who benefits when this is framed as noise? Who benefits when commentators say, "Oh, he's joking. Nah, he didn't mean it. This won't happen. This won't happen. We've seen this before." Because that framing does one thing very efficiently. It buys time. Time for damage to accumulate quietly. Time for recalibration behind closed doors. Time for allies to hedge. And that recalibration, it's already happening. God knows. You don't see it on cable news. God knows you don't hear it in sound bites on CBS. But diplomats, they hear it. And they don't wait for certainty, they plan for risk. And right now, American reliability is being priced as risk. And that should alarm you. Not emotionally, but it should alarm you rationally. Because here's the critical point that most people miss: systems don't break when rules are violated once, they break when there's pattern recognition, when people begin to see and systems begin to see that violations stop being punished. They break when behavior that should trigger consequences instead triggers commentary. They break when institutions substitute interpretation for enforcement. That's when gravity takes over. And gravity, we all know gravity doesn't care about intent. You can have the best intentions of the world. It wasn't my intention to jump off of the top of the Chrysler building. Gravity doesn't care. You're going to fall right down to the pavement. Doesn't matter. Gravity doesn't care. Now, let's be very precise, okay? Because this matters. Because this is just not Trump. And, this is not new. This isn't, "Oh, Jake is coming out with a brand new thing he's never said before." No, I've said it a lot. Trump is not the architect of this condition. Trump is a doofus. He's being used. And he is this condition's instrument. He is the delivery system for a deeper failure. A failure of institutional constraint, political courage, and elite discipline. That is the failure. He's useful because he's like Mikey, who you've heard me talk about in the old Life cereal commercials, which I bet a lot of you have seen and heard. Mikey will eat anything. "Hey, Mikey, come destroy NATO for us." Mikey will do anything. That's it. Trump is useful because he'll say anything. He'll threaten anything. He'll test anything. And others will clean it up afterward. You never had to worry about that. That's the arrangement. And as long as that arrangement holds, escalation continues. Not because anybody wants collapse, but because no one stops the drift. Okay? Alliances survive disagreement. They survive weakness. They even survive bad leaders. God knows. They even survive bad leaders. What they don't survive is ambiguity about commitment. The moment allies believe that U.S. guarantees are conditional upon personality, upon ownership, upon mood. When they look at the nation and they see that nearly 50%, because he's a minority president, he didn't get a majority of the vote, that nearly 50% of the people have these attitudes, or as only they can suppose, because they elected him, they voted to put him in office. The moment Europe or any allies look at things like this and think that U.S. guarantees are conditioned on things like this, and a lot of people think we're going crazy. A lot of people think that the United States is destroying itself. And our show ought to be done on that, because that's not an incorrect thought. The moment allies believe U.S. guarantees are conditional based upon personality, ownership, or mood, religious doctrine, they prepare alternatives quietly, methodically, without announcement. And once that begins, the old order does not snap back, it erodes. So here is the indictment, okay? Stated cleanly. What we are witnessing is not foreign policy experimentation. It is behavioral evidence of a system that can no longer govern itself internally and is compensating externally. That is historically recognizable, it is analytically coherent, and it is dangerous precisely because it looks, because of the setup, the compromising of the institutions, the fact that everybody's afraid of their position, of their car service, of their entitlement, of their power, of their notoriety. Everybody is afraid of that being taken away, that they support it. And that's how serious failures enter history, people making it look unserious, not with alarms, but with laughter. And now we answer the question we started with. Not, is this the end of the world? But what breaks first? Not democracy, not immediately, although, you could argue that a trend is underway. Yet another show. Not the economy, not yet. What breaks first is trust density between allies, between institutions, between citizens and authority. Once trust density drops below a threshold, everything else becomes harder to sustain. Governance costs more. Cooperation weakens. Force substitutes for consent. And at that point, every decision carries higher risk. That is the danger zone. Now, this does not mean collapse is inevitable. It does mean clarity is no longer optional. Watch what gets repeated. Watch what gets normalized. Watch who rushes to explain away behavior instead of stopping it. Do go to alternative sources of media like Politics by Jake. Because I'll tell you this, and others of my colleagues are also telling you this, and I recommend them to you as well. Because this is a fight. We could lose the country. And if we lose the country, it will be blood. It will be blood to get it back. And blood is being shed almost as we speak. Because history doesn't announce itself with certainty. It announces itself when power loses the ability to say, this stops here. And right now, that line is wobbling. Now, in closing, I'm not here to panic you. I'm not here to mourn the world like some of my colleagues are doing. I wish they wouldn't do that. I'm here to orient you because once you can see the pattern, you stop being confused. And confusion is what failing systems rely on most. And now I hope you know what you're looking at. Welcome to 2026. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the fight. I'm Jake. And this is Politics by Jake.